Well, I think he should keep his mouth shut and have more respect for the opposition when he plays against them, and look at himself. If he was such a great player and was able to do all the things that he's talking to other people not doing, he wouldn't be on the bench. He'd be out there playing.
The best analysis of all the week's football from Ireland's #1 football man.
Obviously, after the Ger disaster, it was thrust on Bobby, and there was an awful lot of pressure on Bobby. He was carrying the team, and he handled himself brilliantly, and he played unbelievable stuff.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Right, a very good morning to you. You're welcome along. It is Wednesday, the 1st of April. That's right, it's April Fool's Day here on OTB AM. And boy, do we have many jokes that are prank-based for you this morning. Right, Owen? That's the first one, I hope.
Yeah, looking forward to, I don't know, sitting on a whoopee cushion today or whatever people tend to do to get the most out of April Fool's Day. What can you do? A lock-in filled April Fool's Day. Family members have never been in more danger than they have been today, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I hate April Fool's Day. I think it's rubbish, I have to say.
So do I.
I've never come up against it. I've never seen a good one, never heard of a good prank, never actually, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you just have to be, maybe you needed to be a member of a rugby team in the 90s or a football team in the 80s to truly appreciate April Fool's Day, because that seems to have been the high watermark of pranking.
What particular instances are you thinking of?
Well, just the crazy gang and their kind of, I mean, they weren't pranking so much as outright bullying and that kind of stuff. You hear the stories of people, cutting the bottoms off people's socks so that when they go to put them on, hey, the foot comes through, and you're like, wow, okay, that was great, lads, well done, congratulations, you ruined someone's pair of socks. And it's funny, and it's funnier the way you tell everybody how funny it is. Especially, that's my thing about pranks, is like the pranker has to get credit for what they've done, brag about their shitty prank to the point where everybody is then like, aha, yeah, okay, what a great prank that was. It was an amazing thing that you've just done.
That's how Ashton Kutcher made his career, wasn't it? Like if you have a camera on you while doing a hidden camera show, then you're the man. I often had a soft spot for them. I'd be with you on the whole 90s pranking and kind of telling stories afterwards that really aren't that funny. But perhaps there is actually room for some sort of high-end pranking. I'm not sure what it is. It's certainly not picking an academy player and then shoving him in a dryer, for example. Wasn't that Paul Scholes that happened to?
Yeah, he denied that it happened to him, but then...
Oh, yes.
I think it did. I think it was one of the, that never happened, but actually he previously said it had happened, so, or somebody had said they'd seen it happening.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
not
that's not an April. That is just complete, unadulterated bullying. That there is a difference. It's not like the one day of the year where bullies are just, they have free reign. Like, you put some thought into it, and I don't know, it's actually good. And like as we said, there isn't too many great ones that you tend to see. But if you do manage to buck that trend a little bit and come up with something that isn't shoving your mate into a dryer or pulling their shorts down or cutting their socks or damaging their property, then the world is your oyster, really, in terms of all the things you could do.
Yeah. A busy show for everybody out there today on April Fools who haven't got that much to do or who are dreading the thought of working from home while their kids are also working from home, which a lot of us are, is the boat that a lot of us are in this morning. We also have a public service announcement. If you want us to be the receptacle of your bad WhatsApps, 0879 180 180 is the number to send your WhatsApp to, so you don't have to send it to your friends, because it seems like there's a lot of WhatsApp shaming going on at the moment, Owen.
How do you mean? What's give me an example here.
Well, your ma and I don't mean your ma specifically, but your ma, and everybody's
Everyone's
ma
ma.
is
One's ma.
is infesting. One's ma is infesting Paddy's ma, I believe, is infesting your WhatsApp group with stuff that was doing the rounds a couple of days ago.
No. This is it's the exact opposite. One's ma is on the absolute edge of content that should be shared. So whether it is hacks that aren't really hacks, as in like don't click into this link from a Nigerian prince, or they will steal all your money, or don't click into this saying that your bill is due for a phone company you don't sign up to, or they will steal all your money. Those sort of messages, one's ma is on the absolute edge and on the pinnacle of that sort of content. There's a couple of funny songs that if you take certain words out and replace them with lockdown or COVID or something like that, make a funnier song. Maz are on the forefront of that. And generally, any still images or videos that tends to poke at Irish humour in a very twee way, your ma is on the forefront of that and will likely be forwarding that to you via your family WhatsApp group. And like, fair play to them. You just like it can sometimes be a bit of a barrage. I'm sure for people out there, the humour isn't actually amazing, but it's one's ma, so it's fully acceptable.
And actually, all the funnier for the fact that your ma thinks it's funny.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly.
We obviously have been spending a lot of time talking about classic games, and there's a fairly big classic game club coming up with Nathan. They're looking back at the USA 94, Ireland 1, Italy 0 over the next couple of days. I think they might already have watched the game and it might be on tonight. But anyway, the other thing that we're doing is we're introducing the OTB Culture Club, where we're asking high-profile people, friends of the show, to introduce us to something important from a cultural perspective. This is in association with Now TV, and Andy Lee is our first one, and we're playing the first one out today. I'm very excited about this. And one of the things that we want to do is to kind of, frame it in a way that it's either this is going to be worth your while or it's not going to be worth your while. And Rocky 3 was what he picked. You are uncertain about Rocky 3's merits. You feel like perhaps Rocky 3 might be overrated, if in fact it is actually rated at all. Is that fair? Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think the last clause of your sentence there is kind of the most important part. Is it rated at all? Like, I don't think anybody views Rocky 3 as the best of the series. I think that's an outrageous take if anybody actually says that. So I don't think it's actually vastly overrated. I think Rocky as a series in general is overrated. Like, I don't think the majority of them, bar Creed, I really love Creed, are actually that good. And that includes the first Rocky. I think the first Rocky is the one that's probably most overrated, despite the fact that it is the best of the original series. And what I mean is that this is at the very top of the mountain, Rocky, in terms of cinema at the time. If you read the reviews, if you look at the Academy Awards, we'll get into this later on, but some of the films that Rocky beat in the 49th Academy Awards to win that Oscar, it's actually, it is hilarious when you look back on it, to think that Rocky, according to the Academy that year, is better than All the President's Men, Network, and Taxi Driver, three of the greatest films of that era, and Rocky is deemed to be better than them. Rocky's good. It's good, but it's not that good. It's not, like, I'm looking at its IMDb rating this morning just to see if it is really overrated, and it's pretty highly rated. Like 8.1 on IMDb, 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is a 7. Rocky is a 7. Rocky 3 is a 6.5, maybe a 6 if I'm in a bad mood. But there is no way that Rocky is a Best Picture winner. And I know people will completely disagree with that, but it's just not an amazing film. I think the story of the film and the fact that it's made on a shoestring budget and it kind of makes Stallone as a Hollywood icon is great and all that, but that's not how you judge a film. You judge a film on whether or not it's great or not. And some of the punches in Rocky look fake. So it's as simple as that.
I mean, the punches looking fake is kind of irrelevant about whether or not it's a good movie. Like, it's not a documentary. That's the whole point. It's like you go to the movie theater to be entertained and distracted from everyday life. And, as a foundational text of the underdog story, Rocky is literally a movie that spawns a million imitators in different genres. But the whole notion of somebody who's a bum believing for a few minutes that they could be something better, like, channels on the waterfront. I think that you're vastly underrating Rocky for a start. I'm looking at all the Rocky movies ranked by Cinema Blend, and they go Rocky 1 as number 1. Number 2 is Creed, the first one, and number 3 is Rocky 3. So this is the best of the rest, according to the cinephiles out there. And I actually think I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. I thought the camp nature of the relationship between Rocky and Apollo Creed is off the charts. It's like an episode of Batman, the TV series. Like,
I thought you were going to go for Baywatch.
I'm sorry. Actually, we were watching it, and my wife, because that's where Baywatch got the inspiration for it, where they're frolicking in the water after Rocky beats him in a Rocky. There's a scene where Rocky is really slow and he quits, and his wife comes over, and she gives him the pep talk that he needs to find his true self, and he has to reveal himself as a modern man who is frightened and who is scared of not being the full man. And that's the bit where she's like, no, you just have to look inside yourself. And he's like, yeah, I do. And then over the course of a few weeks, he eventually beats a man who is much faster than him in a race because the other man slows down. And at that point, they celebrate wildly by kicking water at each other and then hugging in the most homoerotic fashion. It is a remarkable scene of cinematic glory, and everybody should watch the movie just for that.
I will say it's worth watching. It is worth watching. Like I'm not gonna if you put your critic's hat on, you can't really say it's an amazing movie, but it is a fantastic cultural artifact for what you've spoken about. For Mr. T, for Hollywood, Hulk Hogan playing Thunderlips, the most impressive man in the world, or whatever he calls himself, in what is just one of the best comedy scenes in Hollywood history, really, even if it's not intended to be a comedy scene. It's definitely a fantastic cultural artifact. I cannot disagree with that for a second. The soundtrack, Stallone, Mr. T, Hulk Hogan, you've got all the boxes ticked. It's good popcorn flick if you're looking to switch off tonight, for example.
Yeah, so that's all part of the OTB Culture Club, sponsored by Now TV. We'll tell you more about that a little bit later on in the show. I'm going to tell you what's coming up in a minute, but first, the sports news this morning. The fates of a number of this year's major sporting events could become much clearer today. UEFA are to hold a video conference involving the heads of 55 member associations. They're going to discuss the findings of 2 working groups set up in light of the pandemic. One's going to look at how the current football season can be completed across Europe. The other is reviewing rules and financial issues like player contracts and transfer windows. One UEFA source is quoted by The Guardian today as saying it's unlikely the season will resume before the end of June. So the end of June might be a realistic point where that quarantining that they're talking about, those behind closed doors matches stretching into July, and that'd be a reasonable summer of sport for us to look forward to. In tennis, the main board of the All England Club, which is Wimbledon, will convene today to decide whether or not the competition can go ahead. Play in both the ATP and WTA tours has obviously been suspended until the beginning of the grass court season at the start of June. This year's French Open has already been put back to September as a result of the pandemic, in a controversial move that people criticised the French Open for acting unilaterally. But of course, it's exactly what the other tournaments would have done if they'd got their shit together in time. In football, collective wage deferrals are up for discussion when the PFA meet with the Premier League and EFL representatives later on today. The proposal is just one way that all parties will look to tackle the drop in revenues that have come with the COVID-19 shutdown. And NFL executives say they're expecting to start their season on schedule and without interruption. Over 3,500 people in the United States have died already as a result of COVID-19, but the NFL say they're still planning for international games in the 2020 season with a schedule drawn up by May. NFL owners have also agreed to expand the playoffs from 12 to 14 teams. A busy show for you this morning. As I said, it's 7:43 here on April Fool's Day. Coming up for you, we're going to go through the sports pages. We've got our lockdown lowdown coming up at 8 o'clock. Talking Gaelic football with Micheál Quirke, the leash manager, at 8:15. Off the couch is coming at 8:40 today. Joe McGinley is a strength and conditioning coach who works in both rugby and GAA. And as I've said, Culture Club, OTB's Culture Club with Now TV. Andy Lee is introducing us to Rocky 3 in a way that maybe, is going to make people think again about watching this. So let's bring you through the papers.
OTB AM.
So our first port of call, as it is every morning, is offtheball.com. And the main story there is, I wasn't important enough. Noel Hunt on Italy goal he feels was his. So This is a row that has been brewing since, a very long time at this point. And it's Noel Hunt on with his brother last night. Stephen Hunt, obviously, speaking with Joe on the football show. And the issue of the goal that wasn't, that Robbie Keane ended up getting, credited to him, was on the show. And Noel was essentially convinced that it was in his best interest not to push it, even though he clearly felt like he had scored the goal. And I believe it still stands on Robbie's record. So, and then some of the other best stuff that we have there. Pepe Reina talking about his coronavirus battle. He ran out of oxygen. You think about the level of medical care that is available to professional athletes for various reasons, one of which is wealth. And it sounds like it was a very, very scary experience that he had with it. The NFL have confirmed their expansion of the postseason to 14 teams, and a bunch of Irish sports stars, we'll play this for you a little bit later on, are urging people to unite by staying apart. They did the right thing in that video, Owen, and they finished with Paul O'Connell warning us all to stay at home. And I'm like, that's going to work. That is definitely everybody is staying at home.
Yeah, I think Ross Whitaker made the video, and all his years of experience were called into play there when he was deciding how do you finish this, and going with Paul O'Connell, absolutely the correct call. If you watch that and decide, no, Paul, I'm going to go outside, you are most certainly not a very smart person, I think it's fair to say, because he's like, it's not terrifying Paul O'Connell, but even Paul O'Connell being nice is a terrifying version of Paul O'Connell.
At one stage, there was a cardboard cutout of Paul O'Connell. I think it was a Pinergy promotion doing the rounds in the office. Maybe it's an idea, instead of the government sending out letters, and send out cardboard cutouts of Paul O'Connell to trouble spots, kind of like a scarecrow. And have him pop out from time to time behind him as a marketing campaign. And you'll never know if it's actually a cardboard cutout or if it's one of the ones he's going to pop out on. And, give him a giant taser for anybody, for the Jack Grealishes of the world.
I think that's quite. I think that's that could be a global thesis in that year. How to stop things like crime. Just put cardboard cutouts of Paul O'Connell on every turn in every street around the world, and I think you would fix most problems straight away.
I skipped over one story that I want to talk about on offtheball.com, and it's even just a headline. It's brilliant. Shin kicking, horse swimming, and grimacing: the history of Irish sport. This is the brilliant lecture series that Paul Rice has given us on Tuesday nights on the radio on Off the Ball. And shin kicking, horse swimming, and grimacing: the great sport of grimacing. It
sounds like the Ulster Football Championship.
Well, we could look to the past and do this again. I'd be up for a grimacing competition. I'd try and get Packy Bonner, I think, to be Ireland's current representative if this was to be a global thing.
Yeah, he'd be outstanding. I wonder who would be the best person at all three. Do we have a sports person who can grimace and shin kick at a high level? I wonder.
And he's also a horse swimmer.
Yeah, but exactly. Sorry, I forgot about the crucial, the third part of that. I need to actually check that piece out. It sounds fascinating. Paul's knowledge of sports that none of us have ever knew existed in the faraway reaches of history is absolutely incredible. It's definitely worth looking into that.
Yeah, the shin kicking, obviously. I wonder, did you get to wear your hobnail boots?
Probably pre-hobnail. I wonder, were the hobnail boots a product of shin kicking, or was shin kicking a product of hobnail boots? That's the question I want to answer.
Maybe. Okay, so what have we got next here? Sorry, I think it is the Independent, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the Independent for you next. So the headline on the Irish Independent this morning is FAI sweat on UEFA's playoff call. And then they also have a picture of a hurl maker. This is Dowling's. The famed star hurleys have been in existence since 1958, with David Dowling and his younger brother Stephen keeping a family tradition alive, as ash is still being handcrafted at their Kilkenny workshop. So this is the place that makes the hurls that TJ Reid, Richie Hogan and Killian Buckley and Porrick Walsh of Kilkenny use. Porrick Marv Tip as well. And then also there's a headline, clubs and counties to be given extra time to pay financial commitments. So the GAA there was a conference call with GAA inter-county chairpersons yesterday, a conference call, and the Croke Park has said that they're going to help with the deferral of insurance and all that kind of stuff, and they're going to help from a financial perspective. The main story there, though, is the FAI sweating on UEFA's playoff call. So that's going to be today, right? We should know a bit more about this. And at that point, what happens with the Republic of Ireland manager's job is essentially going to have to be decided. At the moment, they've been able to kick that can down the road because Stephen Kenny's contract kicks in August. There was supposed to be a playoff in June. If we won, it was going to be an issue. If we lost, it wasn't going to be an issue. Mick would be finished. Stephen Kenny would take over. Now it looks like the playoff is going to be in September or October, and Stephen Kenny's contract will start in August. So what do? You will have two managers for the same job, or certainly two managers who believe it is their right to have the same job. And it's not a great situation for anybody to find themselves in on.
No, it's definitely not a great situation for either man, really. Like, if you're Stephen Kenny and you try to push the situation, you probably feel that you're in a bit of a difficult position to actually push that, considering there is somebody who has the actual job. So Mick McCarthy, I feel, will lay a claim, and I think if any of us were in Mick McCarthy's shoes, we would also be laying a claim to this, considering the campaign is unfinished. There's also the question about, like, technically your contract is up, Mick. Do you get the same pay going into the next couple of months or potentially a year? Do you get a bit of a pay cut? Do you take a substantial pay cut? How does that work? Like, are the FAI going to perhaps end up paying above the odds given staff cuts elsewhere in the organisation by keeping Mick McCarthy in tow until next year? Like, they're the questions that probably need to be answered fairly soon. It's almost like a double hypothetical at the moment, where it's not guaranteed that Ireland will qualify for the Euros, and then it's also not guaranteed that this playoff will actually go ahead in, say, September. So it's a lot of confusion. Obviously, you can go back and point to the decision to actually have essentially an interim manager for a period of time. But I think really nobody saw this situation coming, and you could see almost why they made the decision at the time. A lot of people would have disagreed with it, and they probably feel the chickens are coming home to roost a small bit. But it's a very, very tricky situation. Like, I think a lot of people would like to see Stephen Kenny in the job and would like to see him nurture the kids pretty quickly, and maybe doing it from the start of next season's domestic game, which would be August, September, might actually be the best course of action.
Yeah, like, I see both sides. If you're in the McCarthy camp, you're thinking, well, look, there's a global pandemic. The competition that I was employed to take over for hasn't finished. I'm going to see that job out. But equally, if you're in the other side of it, it's like, there's been a global pandemic and we need to honor the commitments that we made and the contracts that we have. And you're paid up now and off you go, because, you can get a job in the championship if you want. You can go off, and it seems like quite a lot of money on the table. It's not Stephen Kenny's fault that there's been a global pandemic, and I don't know if anybody thinks that he's not the right man for the job. I mean, certainly there are some ex-players who played under Mick McCarthy who don't think that he's the right man for the job. That's been clear from their public pronouncements. But I think the rest of Irish football and the supporters want to see what life is going to be like under Stephen Kenny. You think back to Damien Delaney, and we've seen this film. Let's just move on. Let's get Stephen Kenny in. He was saying that a long time ago at this point. I'd like to see Stephen Kenny in. If these games are put back to August, September, that's when Stephen Kenny's job is supposed to start. Let's see what he can do.
You could definitely turn this in a little way and say the Nations League, it's a new campaign. This is not just about the qualifying as much as qualifying is the most important thing. It is a new campaign for international teams, as I say, with the Nations League, that there is a case to be made that it is still the right time for a change, that the Euros, of course, is going to be the most important thing that happens within the next 8 months, but there is still this other campaign that is happening here. Like, it's the end of a 2020 year here. So I don't know, like, I think that you could, when this first broke, I thought there's no chance that Mick McCarthy isn't going to be Republic of Ireland manager going into this set of playoffs and then thereby the Nations League. Now I wonder about that. Now I wonder, just because pay cuts are going to come in, like, there will have to be a contract negotiation regardless, isn't there? Like, there's going to have to be a conversation with every FAI employee about how much they're getting paid. That means Mick McCarthy is certainly going to be having a conversation about that, and also his contract that is set to expire. So a conversation is going to have to be had, and I just hope that the FAI are very clear in exactly what they want before they have that conversation with Mick and that conversation with Stephen Kenny.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing: it's that conversation is going to have to happen relatively soon. So either Mick is in situ for the rest of that tournament, and that decision is made, and Stephen Kenny looks after the under-21s for the rest of their time, or the decision is made, and essentially you're paying McCarthy up and saying, "Look, thanks very much for this very unfortunate circumstances," and Stephen Kenny is the next guy. The bit of limbo that we have at the moment was grand while the fixtures weren't set in stone and there was no date for them. So that obviously is going to have to be made fairly soon. What's in the Examiner, on?
They are also leading with that photograph from David Dowling and his hurl shop. A quote from him there: "A Cork hurl has a bigger, thicker heel and a little bit more in the handle." GEA to cover clubs insurance for now, writes John Fogarty, and Horgan can't wait to return Rebels to right road. That's Patrick Horgan there. And the former Kerry chief fears for New York GEA's future. So financial turmoil could be in store for New York GEA and what the competition actually holds from them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next little while, whether or not they're going to get a championship game this year. I think is very much up in the air, and I think it's doubtful at this point.
That interview is coming from the new Long Haul podcast, which is broadcast from the Long Haul pub in New York. Friend of the show, Johnny Kennedy, obviously behind that. And is that when you're talking about the Cork hurl, is it THICC? That's what they're talking about?
Jesus. Yes, exactly. But that is exactly how they spell it in Cork. Absolutely correct.
The Irish Times is next, and shaft of light amid the gloom as Ringrose signs deal is the headline on Jerry Thornley's piece about Gary Ringrose signing a new deal that's going to keep him with Leinster until the 2021-22 season at least. It's 3 rugby stories on the first page of the sports section today. World Rugby looking at all the options. Say again, sorry?
Sorry, no, I jumped in too soon there.
World Rugby looking at all the options is the headline there, and another Thornley piece about what's going to come next for rugby. And it's a privileged place to be on the front line. Ireland International is working as an accident and emergency doctor in Cardiff. I think this is Dr. Claire Malloy, who is working in A&E in Cardiff at the moment, and says it's a bit eerie wandering around Cardiff City because there's nobody there. She talks about the surge at the beginning. The number of sick patients has ramped up. We had to intubate 3 last night. Not all corona suspected, probably one. Everyone's on edge, expecting the storm that we're seeing in our nearby hospital, the Royal Gwent, that has the highest number of cases in Wales. They're showing numbers akin to that of the northern Italian region, which must be pretty grim because you realise that this is going to be your job and your life for the foreseeable future. And so she's 31, played flanker, and is using art as a way to de-stress. It's an excellent piece from Gavin Cumsky this morning, kind of just bringing home how many Irish people are actually involved in the front line of this battle against coronavirus.
The Irish Sun this morning leads with Daniel Levy and the headline, "Time to pay up," but he banks £7 million while telling Spurs workers to take 20% cut. So Daniel Levy grabbed his bonus, I think, yesterday of around £7 million, and as you can see in the headline there, is suggesting clubs everywhere will take pay cuts. FAI holding staff wages. Meanwhile, on a similar theme, the FAI confirmed it is introducing wage deferral. It's obviously been a very tough couple of years for FAI employees who've been there over the long haul, and Prem is split over hub idea, writes Martin Lipton and Alan Nixon. So there doesn't seem to be any consensus in favour or against this idea that we've been speaking about on the show all week about the quarantine camps for potential super conclusion to the Premier League over the course of the summer. So no decision on that coming soon. And delightful for United. Manchester United are back on the trail of Juventus defender Matthias de Ligt. The Red Devils were keen on the Dutch centre-back when it became clear he was leaving Ajax last summer, but he opted for a big money move to Turin, but has failed to settle in. So that could be a bit of gossip that might keep the football gossip writers going for the next little while. The Ligt to Manchester United will obviously be a great move for them.
Yeah, did he play badly in Turin? Was he that bad for Juve?
I don't think so. I don't think it's been like an absolute car crash of a season whatsoever. So I would be surprised if this happened, to be honest.
Is this all Pogba related? Is that what this is?
Potentially. Like, I mean, maybe there is a situation where they expected bigger things from the Ligt instantaneously, but I certainly thought that the whole idea was to get him in, and within a couple of seasons he would become the Chiellini or the Bonucci, and the person who would then be guiding somebody else through it. Like, he is the person who is being guided at the moment, and I would certainly be patient if I were Juve, but no signs in the piece anyway that they actually want to sell him.
Okay. FAI facing an anxious wait is the headline in the back of the Herald this morning, and they also have Roy Curtis column. Date for Slovakia match has major impact on managers. This is Dan McDonald's story, which is obviously run in the Irish Independent as well. If the matches are refixed for after August 1st, then the new FAI hierarchy will be served with a major dilemma, as Kenny's contract says he takes over at that point. It's going to get very interesting. It's like definitely one of the most interesting subplots in Irish sport at the moment. 2 men, 1 job, a series of contracts, a bitter dispute with the former Irish international captain, or a bitter dispute with your next manager. Like, either way, it's a very, very difficult situation for the FAI to navigate.
But I'd say
and the GA to give clubs.
Sorry, Ger, but like when you put it in those terms, who would you rather have to dispute with, your ex-manager or your soon-to-be manager?
Well, you don't really want to be pissing off your new manager, do you?
Exactly.
Like, that's kind of what signal does that send to Irish football? It's like, well, this old guy is the guy that we really wanted, but the new guy, we're just landed with him, so we're going to keep him at arm's length for as long as possible. Like, there's certainly weird things going on in the world at the moment, and maybe those weird things are a pathway for Stephen Kenny to become the new Ireland manager. And let's face it, we've already seen Stephen Kenny's salary is a much more reasonable salary than what previous Ireland managers have been paid in recent seasons. And there's no indication that he's going to be any worse than any of those managers. So maybe in the new world and the new normal, Stephen Kenny is exactly the type of person who should be managing the Republic of Ireland.
It's not the worst shot in the world, that's for sure. It's that story leading the way in the Irish Daily Star this morning as well. Choppy waters, FAI and GAA to cut and defer wages, with a photograph there of Stephen Kenny and Mick McCarthy. An income levy for Tottenham. That's the story with regards to Daniel Levy and him going for pay cuts at Tottenham Hotspur, but also getting his bonus. Padraig says golf is nothing major. That's Padraig Harrington. And you've got to finish with the misses. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer tells players to practice in the garden with their partners. Yeah, well, I think that's... What's that story? Say that again?
What is that story?
Oh, well, he's saying that if anybody has a partner at home that may be able to cross the ball to them or pass the ball to them, to utilise that resource at home and then kick the ball to the back of the net. So I'm sure that'll help the attackers. But what about the defenders, Ole? That's what I want to know.
It's a headline writer's dream, really, isn't it? And some of the other tabloids are having fun with that this morning as well. On to The Guardian. I took a long, hard look at myself. I needed to press the reset button. Rory McIlroy, and how missing the cut at the Open galvanised his career. So they've got an exclusive with McIlroy this morning. They're also talking about the aid package that the ECB have unveiled, which is to try and save the sport of cricket. And coronavirus crisis deepens. Football authorities fear season will not restart until June. June is a much more realistic starting point for football in England. And, once that bottoms out, once they start planning for something realistic, then you can begin to hope that the plans they put in place for that point will be achievable. That's all I think anybody wants at this point, is something to look forward to as a distraction, obviously, while public health is the single most important thing in all of these conversations. Taking that as read, football is going to restart at some point, and finding whatever form it restarts in sooner rather than later would be good for a lot of people.
100%. The back page of the Mirror is take a pay cut. Spurs chief Levy, who earned £7 million last year, demands football gets real about massive salaries. McCarthy, Kenny and co facing wage hits. That is the story about the FAI going for pay deferrals and pay cuts. From Leeds to Manchester United, the real story behind how the deal was done. That's Eric Cantona, and a bit of a long piece, a long form reading that in the Mirror this morning. And the headline on Ole is wingers, attackers, goalkeepers, set pieces. They have coloured in red the first letter of each of those words. So that is WAGS. Ole tells his players, get your wives to keep you sharp by crossing you the ball in the garden. Miles and miles and miles and miles is what the papers are getting out of this Ole Gunnar Solskjaer story.
Mixed pay cut is the headline on the back page of the Irish Daily Mail this morning. Ireland boss has salary halved as FAI defer wages. This is Philip Quinn's story, and he's got details of the pay cuts that the FAI have instigated across their staff. With income streams drying up due to the coronavirus pandemic, the FAI has followed the IRFU and the GAA by implementing wage deferrals for its 200-strong staff. The measures were announced yesterday by Ger and Eoin, and they start with the highest earners. All employees earning more than $102,000 per year, which includes McCarthy, Stephen Kenny and Robbie Keane, will take a 50% hit. I'm not sure about that Robbie Keane figure, because was there not a renegotiation of Robbie Keane's deal whenever he joined Middlesbrough? I thought there had been, but anyway, employees pay between 48 and 102 grand will be down 25% of their take-home pay. Those earning between 25 and 48 face a 10% deferral, while those earning less than 25% will not be affected. And they also have a story about the IRFU facing financial difficulty and the prospect of a major financial blow, with growing fears the November Test series could be wiped out by the effects of the pandemic. The 2 Test series against Australia looks certain to be called off, and now it looks like Australia are talking about not coming to the Northern Hemisphere at all in November. Perhaps the Southern Hemisphere teams won't come either. So we'll see. I think obviously Ireland are due to play South Africa, Japan and Australia. And you do wonder if perhaps one of those games goes ahead, 2 of those games go ahead, none of those games go ahead. All of those are options as it stands at the moment. But we were talking about this yesterday, and if international travel was safe at that point, and it's, mass gatherings are back on the agenda, then neither of which is a guarantee, by the way. I'm not taking that as read, but if they were, you can see how the best thing for the IRFU and the best thing for the other unions would be for those games to go ahead, for those TV deals to continue, for the sponsorship deals that are around the November internationals to continue, because that would be getting money back to where it's supposed to be, and some kind of normal economics would return. Maybe they have to share a bit more with the touring teams, and maybe World Rugby has to step in and kind of guarantee those games, because that would be the quickest way to get back to some semblance of normality, right?
I think so. Like, I just, you can completely see why this is one of the most challenging sports things that is on our calendar as Irish sports fans over the next couple of months. Like, this truly global thing where you've got people come from the Southern Hemisphere to the Northern Hemisphere. I think that the RFU are probably looking at that thinking it's in huge trouble. And obviously all these games that happen in Dublin are just massive money spinners. Like, are they taking into account the fact that there is still a game against Italy to be played in the Six Nations at some point this year? Like, it could be as big a money spinner as any of the others, any of the Southern Hemisphere teams coming up here, because of the fact that the tournament is still very much in the balance from an Irish perspective. Like, it's going to be tough. Definitely going to be tough for the organisation if they have to give up 3 of those fixtures. I'd be surprised if we can actually get to a place in the sporting calendar where those will be able to happen, and then also a place in the world where people can travel all the way across the planet and safely take part in a sporting event. So we'll see how that goes.
All right. The UK 08791. I think we're out of time for those. We'll come back to those a little bit later on if we get a bit more time. 0879180 180 is the number. You can WhatsApp us your crap mum jokes if you want, or your crap dad jokes, probably more likely. We are going to bring you through some of the lockdown lowdown next. We have Micheál Quirke standing by to talk to us about a range of different things, and we're also going to get some strength and conditioning advice from somebody who knows what it's like to train professional athletes and also amateur GAA athletes. That's coming your way in Off the Couch a little bit later on today, but we're going to take a quick break. We're back after this.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
But when I got to Liverpool, I thought, right, I bought myself a nice Aston Martin. I pulled up on the lights alongside Roy Keane, of all people, and I had the shades on. I think I was listening to some Speed Garage. My arm was out the window. I was having myself. And then Roy gave me that look that he's given many of people in his time. And as he sped off into the distance, I was sitting in this car, looked at myself in the mirror and thought, I need to get rid of this.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
Okay, so people like you are probably wondering how people like me manage to stay so ripped during this time. Well, the answer is pretty simple. All you've got to do is eat a load of protein bars. So I'm currently trying to find out what is the best protein bar on the market. And today I am reviewing Reignited. As you can see, this particular bar is called Reignited Carb Killer. It is an absolute murderous bar when it comes to carbohydrates. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear the carbohydrates in my house cowering in fear. If you put this thing into a bread bin, it will go on a killing spree. So it's Reignited Carb Killer High Protein Bar Fudge Brownie Flavour. We're going to give this a percentage score. Let's see how it is. 60 grams, by the way, and 22 grams of it is protein. I'm basically holding a lump of protein. Life has never felt so good. So let's go in. Right, so we've got a chocolatey exterior, it seems. A little bit of toffee on the outside there. You can... smells like Cocoa Pops, actually. Obviously, Cocoa Pops that will get you ripped and is actually a bar. Okay. That is actually unbelievably nice. That is really, really nice. It's got some sort of marshmallow meets biscuit on the inside here. If there was a 5-a-day of sugars, this thing would clearly do all 5 straight away, because this has gone straight to my head. Really, really good. Really, really good. Like, it's like a Milky Way bar, only you can taste the gym off it. Now you're probably wondering, what are you supposed to do? Maybe the protein bar? Are you supposed to do anything else to ensure you get the full benefits? No. Absolutely not. You do not have to do anything. You just have to sit still and wait for your biceps to grow. So I'm already feeling pretty good after this, feeling like I could lift big things. You know, I'm feeling protein filled and nourished. I'm feeling nourished after this. So that's Reignited Carb Killer High Protein Bar Fudge Brownie flavour. I'm going to give that's a good 74%. You know, I'm very surprised. I thought it would be almost plasticky. I thought it would be, well, I guess it is kind of plasticky, but it's gorgeous plastic, really. Trust me. We do have a second one here. We've got Reignited Carb Killer, also an absolute slaughterer when it comes to starchy products. Reignited Carb Killer High Protein Bar Birthday Cake flavour. Some of you may be experiencing birthdays during lockdown. Not to worry. Reignited Carb Killer High Protein Bar Birthday Cake flavour is a perfect companion if nobody is allowed to come over and celebrate your birthday. Oh wow. Have a look at this. We've clearly got some sort of like white chocolate exterior and a load of like hundreds and thousands on the top of it. Let's go in. This is Reignited Carb Killer Protein Bar Birthday Cake. Wow. Every sort of food stuff ending in OSE you could possibly imagine right in here. Again, absolutely wired immediately off the sugar. It feels like I've never had sugar like this before. Feel, you know, so much more powerful. Feel my teeth falling out at the same time. God, you feel great. And I mean, again, as I say, you don't need to do anything after eating one of these, which is the most fantastic thing. Go for a lie down, wake up, and you've got an 8-pack. So giving this one a rating, it's not as nice as the other one. I'm going to give this maybe 67%. So that's 67% for Reignited Carb Killer High Protein Bar. Highly recommended from an expert here. Gyms are closed. You can't really get the full workout you need, but it doesn't matter. All you got to do is eat a handful of these things and you'll be absolutely fine.
Some more of Shay and Sushi there. We need a new name for this. Owen, obviously, now that you're not in Japan, is there a name for this series of food reviews that you're doing from your home?
There isn't, actually. I'm not very good at this sort of thing. I'm a terrible headline writer, terrible at puns.
How are you sourcing your food? Obviously, I know you can go anywhere, but like, are there specific places that are sending you stuff now that you've become a food influencer like this? Is this the type of thing that you're open to?
Yeah, it is. Life is difficult.
You're asking that. Sorry. Okay.
the shells tend to be to evade you almost when you're this much of a food influencer. But those ones I got in Dunstores and Stephen's Green, the grenade carp killer, before lockdown, I should say. I got those weeks ago, and they were just sitting there staring at me, and then I reviewed them. So that's the very interesting backstory to that video.
0879 180 180. If you want Owen Sheehan to review any foodstuffs for you, then you can WhatsApp him and we'll get the details to him. Now, I want to play you this. So this is a game of football in the back garden that takes on a slightly, I don't know, is this the type of thing that's bad? Is this sinister? Is the violence here the type of thing that we should expect? I mean, so this video I think has done 2.5 million views. Certainly it had done yesterday when I saw it.
It's a sublime flying kick is what we're expecting.
I don't know. Yeah, so here we go. The video has started. That was the WhatsApp from the guy's phone. So obviously it seems like this is on some kind of fixed camera in the back garden. And it's the young lads versus the big lad, and the young lad eventually gets his revenge with the flying kick until the big lad gets up and goes, right, I'm going to have you there. And I presume it's a da. Is it a da, or is it like...
I think it's a da. I think that's CCTV, and I think that the kid scoring the goal into the empty net at the very end is almost my favourite part about it, that he ends up winning this particular game of World Cup. It's put down in our doc here as Wembley. Obviously, Tommy refers to this game as Wembley. I would certainly be more of the World Cup vernacular,
where it's 1-on-1 with a goalkeeper
or multiple people. Whoever scores progresses to the next round. But if it's 1-on-1 against the goalkeeper, whoever scores the goal gets to stay outfield, and the other person has to stand in goal until another goal is scored. Or like we used to even have like a strange version of that where the person who would score would actually stand in goal, because I don't know, we were obviously a collection of people who actually enjoyed playing goalkeeper. But anyway, that's that one. A couple of people who partake with GAA teams or rugby teams potentially have started Zoom sessions over the last couple of days. It's something that obviously people have been using technology to instruct their players, instruct their teammates exactly what they should be doing to keep themselves on their toes. Jose Mourinho is one of these coaches who's engaged in it. Have a look at his Zoom session with the Spurs players.
5 minutes touching the ball. If you have a wall or if you have a person in your house, if you have a garden, go to the garden.
And then, of course, somebody on Twitter did this.
5 minutes touching the ball. If you have a wall or if you have a person in your house, if you have a garden, go to the garden.
Emergency mode, Jose Mourinho. I would like to have actually got a closer look at where Jose is when he's doing this. He's like sitting at the countertop, screaming at his Zoom, and everybody else in his house wondering what the hell is going on, because it sounds like the world is about to end. This is their last ever training session. It's now or never really to do this training, and maybe that's how you get your players motivated during all of this.
Well, I mean, it was a good voice. It's a perfect voice for this time, right? Like if he was making public service announcements in England about stay home, I think that would have the same impact as having Paul O'Connell in your garden, right? Am I wrong about this?
I think so. I think that there's definitely something haunting about Jose Mourinho's voice. I think that if we were in, say in episode 1 of Chernobyl, when the voice started playing out through the factory, telling people to get out or whatever, if you replace that with Jose Mourinho, it actually wouldn't be any less scary, I don't think. It'd be a great sort of villainous voice that doesn't have any particular face.
Okay, let's move on, because Chris O'Dowd at Big Boiler on Twitter has been putting stuff up, and I just don't have the actual text of his. Oh yeah, our toddlers are really getting into The Sopranos now is the first one, which makes a lot of sense. No, I'm sure it's not great for their language. And then a little bit earlier on, he tweeted this, which I certainly got a laugh in our house. I was watching some show last night, and 2 characters shook hands, as people do, but it was suddenly such a risque embrace to watch. It was as if they just slapped dicks.
We were. It's definitely been something that I've noticed as well, where you do view everything through the coronavirus prism. As I was saying last week when we were watching the 2014 All Ireland hurling final the last day, there was an elderly man in the crowd, and I was like, why are you not staying away from this elderly man? He's clearly at risk. Then I was like, actually, no, this is 6 years ago. This is not happening right now. And I don't know, maybe this is the future now. Maybe handshakes will be looked at with a great level of disgust in the future, I think.
Yeah, I think he might be right, and that kind of brought me back to Rocky 3. There was a little bit of that going on in Rocky 3, just metaphorically as opposed to actually. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number if you want to send something through to us for the lockdown lowdown.
One more video in our lockdown lowdown this morning. Of course, everybody's out there running around in circles. This woman on social media was having none of it.
Why is that person running? You okay? What are you doing running? Is someone chasing you? You're just running for fun? 7 o'clock in the morning.
And then for our radio listeners, she takes a swig of red wine.
That is,
we can all get behind that.
100%. Like, I don't see why not do both. I think we should be encouraging people to be out running, but I think we should also be encouraging people to 100% crack open a bottle of red at 7 a.m. If that's what you want to do, do you is, I think, the best advice we can give.
A few people thought that we did Classic Game Club this week live on Monday morning when we were watching the Galway Kildare game from 1998 back, and I was swigging on some red wine there, but actually it was Sunday evening that we recorded that, right? You're going to back me up on that story that I'm maintaining for decorum.
It's like I wouldn't have had any issue with you kind of rolling out of bed and sipping on the red wine, but kind of rolling out of bed and being in the Kildare jersey, I would have almost had a bigger issue with like actually sleep. Like, listen, if you want to crack open something right now at 8:21 on this Wednesday morning, nobody is going to look at you strangely, Ger. It's okay. Do it.
Alan O'Neill's been in touch. Morning, lads. Where can we get the links for the Classic Game Club matches? YouTube.com/off the ball. Go to our playlists, and there's one there for Classic Game Club. And we always share where we're watching the game. Most of these games are on YouTube, either on the official GA channel, if it's that one, or if it's football, they're probably mostly illegal YouTube streams, but ultimately they haven't been taken down just yet. So tonight on Off the Ball, it is a very special Classic Game Club. Nathan, Vinnie Pert and David Myler are looking back at the game between Italy and Ireland in 1994. And that Italian team, Nathan tweeted the teams yesterday, if I can just make this a little bit bigger. Pagliuca in goals, Mauro Tassotti, Costa Corta, Baresi and Maldini. The AC Milan back four, a sensational all-time great back four. Midfield, Roberto Donadoni, Dino Baggio, Demetrio Albertini and Ivani. So again, backbone by the AC Milan team with Roberto Baggio and Giuseppe Signori, who at that stage was top scorer in Serie A. Up front, there was a bit of speculation about whether or not Signori was worth his place in the team because he was an amazing goal scorer in Serie A, but hadn't yet fired on the international stage. And there was obviously a couple of other players that could have got in the team ahead of him. But what an amazing Italian team. The Ireland team, not bad as well. A couple of passengers in it. I'd be interested to see what the lads have to say about it. But that's coming up tonight on Classic Game Club. All right, former Kerry footballer and Laois boss Mike Quirke is joining us next on OTB AM. And that screen has just disappeared on me here, so I'll tell you what's coming. Yeah, first though, let's hear from the brilliant Paul Rouse, who delivered the second of his sports history lectures to us on Off the Ball last night. Here he is talking about the history of Gaelic football.
This kind of period, maybe 1400s on, and they become incredibly popular up to the period we're going to end this conversation on, which is 1800. What about the likes of football or hurling or the more popular kind of mundane sports of today?
Okay, so we'll start with football. Football in Ireland, you can find mention of football in the Statute of Galway in 1527 when there was records of people playing football. There was football in a football field was laid out at a school in County Down in 1620, and there is evidence from court reports and later from newspaper reports from the 1700s of football being played by groups of men, and it was men, in various areas. So, for example, it normally only made the papers in the 1700s when there was a fight at it or when there was around it. So, for example, there were riots at Finglas in the 1770s when a man got his skull broken and his nose partially taken off during a football match. Similarly, in Kildare in 1792, there was rioting. So it usually only made the papers in the event of there being trouble at matches. But there is other evidence which suggests that that's just the tip of the iceberg. That for all the games that ended up in trouble, and you get a picture of a sporting world that's violent and dangerous and nasty, there are many, many more games at which there is no affray, that nobody gets injured, and that people just are engaged in recreation and not in anything else. So, for example, in 1746, there's a match in Parsonstown in Kings County, which of course is now Borough County Offaly, where the Parsons family sponsored a game and threw in the ball to start the game. And then most famously of all from the 1800s, or from the 1700s, a man called Matt Concannon wrote a poem called Match at Football, which was published in 1720, and it's about a football match that took place on a stretch of ground that people will be well familiar with. It's Oxmantown Green. So if you're driving along the quays from Houston Station towards the city centre, it's just on your left, around the place where the National Museum is now, just on the left-hand side there. That was a huge, long green area which was used for sport in the 1700s. And Matthew Concannon wrote a poem about a match being played there between the men of Lusk and the men of Swords. And so many of the things that we now associate with football matches are apparent in that game. So, for example, number one, the Lusk men and the Swordsmen despised each other, and that's written in the poem. They really wanted to beat each other. Number two, they're referred to as being experienced players and being able to play because of their practice over the years. So this is not something that they just turn up and it's a random event. It's something that's part of a structure. There is talk about the players being led onto the field by pipers and led around the place, of the crowd around the rope, around it, going wild at every score, about people drinking and gambling along the sidelines, and of the tackling being ferocious throughout the whole spread of the game.
Wow. So
this tells you that football, and the word football really matters here. I know there's a whole colonization of that word of football, and the word football means a different thing to people in America, to Australia, to England, to Ireland, and even within Ireland. I say football and I mean Gaelic football. You say football, which are football show, and you mean soccer. Mm-hmm. So it's this word football. What did it mean in 1700? And what it meant in 1700 was that there was no single set of rules used even across Ireland for any one game. There are localized, agreed rules. It doesn't mean it's anarchic. It doesn't mean that what they played was not something that was played to a structure. It just means it was an agreed structure around the time, and it didn't run right all across the countryside. So the word football is used to describe folk football all across Ireland and indeed Britain and across Europe. And the idea that there was a Gaelic football, for example, is nonsense.
Yeah, fascinating stuff, as always, from Professor Paul Rouse. The full piece available now on youtube.com/off the ball. Now, delighted to say we've got former Kerry footballer and current Laois manager Mike Quirke with us on the line. Good morning to you, Mike.
Morning, Eoin.
So how have you found the last few weeks? What have you been getting up to try and keep the head in a good place?
I've probably found it as strange as everybody else. You know, it's not the nicest way to have your first year into county management, I suppose. But look, we're trying to do as much as we can, trying to get ahead of it a small bit, and get guys doing as much as they can on their own, and take a bit of personal responsibility for the whole thing, and then see what you can, get out of doing online and different bits and pieces. But it's just a totally different landscape, and I know football is largely insignificant at this time, but for the people that are stuck in the middle of it, we're still trying to make it as best we can.
Absolutely, and I think for everybody really, having even the prospect of thinking about football or thinking about when it might return, of course it's insignificant in the wider scheme of things, but it's kind of important to think about something else once in a while. And for you, I'm sure you've got plenty of things to think about. Like, is it a situation where you're organising Zoom sessions? Are you still very much in touch with the players?
Oh yeah. We're very, I think there's no harm at this time, to give players the opportunity to do some work on their own. So every fella has their own, talent fitness and skills work that, to be honest, fellas are only bursting to do anyway, because, you know, like most of these guys are either students or teachers, or, you know, there's some guys that are still working hard, obviously, but a lot of them are off. So most fellas are only looking to do stuff to fill the time and to be as active as they can, really. So getting them to do training and doing that stuff is the easy part, really. But the hardest part is trying to maintain some bit of connection with the whole thing and keep the team together in a way that we'd be happy with. And to do that, you've got to be a little bit novel and come up with different bits and pieces that engage guys really as a collective. So your Zoom and different bits and pieces, just to give guys face time with each other, really, and do some activities that, you know, it can be as fun as anything else.
Right. Okay. Well, what sort of activities are we talking here?
You know, like if you want to come up with like a table quiz online where guys are, you know, seeing each other and having a bit of crack, whatever it is, you know, like, you know, questions and answers, talent shows, well, do whatever it is that can just get guys, you know, online seeing each other and having a bit of a laugh, you know. Then you can do your video analysis and you can go through different scenarios and you can do all that serious and dry stuff as well. But it's just literally to get guys, like some of these fellas won't have seen, like all of us, they won't have seen each other for maybe, you know, 3 or 4 months, and you're cutting off a kind of a limb then from guys who've been spending, you know, most time in each other's pockets, training or in the gym or doing whatever, and then that's all gone. Like everybody else, it's nearly an isolation where fellas are just cut away from everybody, and that's difficult for everybody, you know. But especially guys who are so used to the routine of training and being in the gym or on the field. So you just want to try and maintain some kind of a connection like that, so that when you do get on the field eventually, whenever that'll come, that it should come a little bit more seamlessly than if you don't.
It's amazing, really. I think what a lot of us have realised over the last couple of weeks is how important those conversations actually can be, because even just speaking on a personal level, like the idea of actually hopping on Zoom or having like Skype chats with people on a regular basis and an organised basis almost kind of seemed like a bit of a naff idea. But then the necessity of it over the last couple of weeks has actually proved that that's actually completely the wrong way to look at it entirely. And you come away from those conversations, whatever it is, a table quiz, a conversation with a couple of mates, feeling so much better about yourself and about life. And it's a vital part of actually maintaining good mental health, as well as keeping an inter-county panel gelled together at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. Like my mom is in her 70s, and now I'm getting video calls from my mom, and my mom, you know, would have done her on the phone before, you know, and like that face-to-face connection is something that's really, really important. And again, you know, to reiterate your point, we wouldn't have thought about it, you know, 2 months ago, or, you know, you pick up the phone, you might call somebody. No, it's a video call, because we're realizing that, and there is research to back it up, but we're realizing that face connection, to be able to see somebody is just, it's more powerful than just a call or just a text message or just a WhatsApp message. So, and again, then for people in my position and you know, whether it's a club team or an inter-county team, everybody's trying to come up with ways without burdening people, because everybody understands that the priority is that you mind your family and you do what you're supposed to do and keep yourself out of harm's way. But then you're trying to be creative and try to come up with different bits and pieces that will help that team collective stay together some bit.
Do you find that there's a greater appreciation almost from your players for what they have to do to keep things ticking along in terms of having these conversations? Because like, even if we're saying here that we're seeing people behave in different ways, like whether it's a mother who's more used to technology, or I think actually in this case where there's actually young males who are actually realizing how important some of these conversations are. Like, are you starting to realize that the players have a more acute realization of the importance of all of this and the importance of communication?
Yeah, I think we all are. On like all over every community, really. I think people have that realization that maybe wasn't there before, which comes with every kind of a tragedy or big crisis or event. We get a little bit more perspective and a bit of context and what are the, you know, the really important things. But look, the group, you know, to speak for the group that I'm working with, I would have thought from the first minute I started working with them, they were a very kind of dedicated bunch. And I know every inter-county bunch are very dedicated, but these fellas just blew me away with their effort and the way they approached everything and their professionalism and their ambition. And it's amazing. Through this whole thing, I'm just seeing that play out in different circumstances, you know, and I'm sure it's everywhere now. And I'm sure, you know, I'm not talking just for my fellas, but I just think guys are they want a bit of a focus and they want a bit of a direction in these times. So whether that is their training or their physical work or their ball work or their, you know, looking at videos or reading books or whatever it is, I think people are diving into it both feet, because they want a sense of focus to put their energy into something when they can't get out and they can't do anything outside in the street. So it's interesting, but I think we'll all emerge with a with a newfound kind of realization of what the really important things are in the whole setup.
When you say that the lads are looking for greater direction at a time like this, do you find that it works the same way in the opposite direction, that you're getting great fulfillment from giving direction and having involvement that way?
No, I mean, look, if anything, this time just affords you an opportunity to talk to fellas more one-on-one and give guys a little bit of a steer. You know, and sometimes during the season when you're in the National League and games are coming so thick and fast, you don't have that opportunity to actually stop and talk to fellas and see what's going on. And in the last couple of weeks, I've probably learned as much, you know, about some of these fellas as I have in the first, 4 or 5 months. Just because you have that time to slow down and actually have a conversation about somebody's family or, whatever it is, and you're learning stuff. And that's only good from a management or a player's point of view. And I'm sure everybody's in the same position. It's so unprecedented is a word now, it's getting flogged to death, but it really is. And for anybody, for yourselves trying to run a sports show or to manage a football team, everybody's got to come up with new ways and find how can you make the best out of this situation. And whether that's looking at different video scenarios and trying to engage a conversation with fellas and have guys coming up with different answers and different bits and pieces, instead of wasting a Tuesday night after training doing that for half an hour, let's get all that stuff done now out of the way. And then when we get to the field, it can be just about getting back into that collective idea.
When you say that you've been learning new things about your players, is there anything in particular that's been a theme across the entire panel in terms of things that you've learned?
No, look, nothing I'd like to share really on. It's just more personal stuff, Sure. Look, like you know the stuff that they do on the field, you know how they train, you know their attitude, and to be fair, the vast majority of the fellas that I'm dealing with have an unbelievable attitude towards preparing themselves, their body in the game. But these are just little different different stuff about guys that they like to do away from the game, how they're managing the whole situation themselves, their family situation, do they have people that are in vulnerable positions or not, stuff like that. You don't really get the opportunity to find out, but that's really, really important, and far more important than training on a Tuesday night. So it's just you can go back into training whenever we do, just having a little bit more of a connection with people on a personal level, you'd hope.
For you personally, then, how have you been managing the day-to-day? Because, it's not just the inter-county so far this year. It's been a club manager for the last few years, having that routine in your life, and then for that routine to kind of be taken away and having all this time all of a sudden. Have you been seeing that as an opportunity to do extra stuff, or has it been a challenge for you that you've kind of needed to address?
I got 3 kids on. I got boys that are 9, Cameron and Ethan, and I got Addison, who's 7, going on 27, man. So it's being filled fairly easily, to be honest. They'll be up soon and they'll be running the house for the next couple of hours. But look, you're reading books on. I'm trying to take on another piece of study, man. I'm looking at different opportunities to see can I further my study a little bit in a constructive way. And you're just trying to, again, whatever it is, whether it's technology, which I wouldn't have been hugely au fait with before this, or it's a couple of good books, or it's a couple of interesting kind of academic papers, 1 or 2 I found recently. You're just trying to broaden as much as you can really on it, and most of that for me is coming in a reading sense.
When you're looking to further your study, are you thinking about yourself as a coach as well and as a manager in the background? Or is this all one, really, that you don't really see the studies as a separate thing to the management, that one should benefit the other?
Yeah, it does. I did the Masters a couple of years ago and I enjoyed the kind of challenge of it. Now it's a lot of work, obviously, especially when you got kids. And I'm just looking at another kind of postgrad, maybe something in the same kind of line or similar. I like the idea of having an opportunity just to keep learning, really, and to keep reading and to keep finding out new stuff. And whether that's specifically the same kind of field in terms of coaching and performance, and or broaden it out a little bit, maybe into psychology stuff. I just have a fascination with I suppose with learning really on and with finding out new things. If you look back now and say, look at yourself now, look at yourself 10 years ago, and how much more you've experienced and learned and grown. It'd be a fright to waste that time when you have the opportunity to not spend it learning and finding out some more information, I suppose.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, but is there anything that you've read recently that you'd recommend to people, even away from your line of studies, or even if it goes perfectly in with your line of studies?
I just read, I read an interesting paper just by Anya McNamara there. I'm not sure if you come across it. It's about, it was particularly kind of about kids who get deselected at different, whether it's from development squads or club teams or whatever. And the information was, I'm working my way through it. It's a big paper, but it's very interesting and worth to read for people that, if the thought would be that if you get deselected, that it demotivates kids and that they don't play if they get cut from a development squad or cut from a club team or whatever. But this paper would kind of look to challenge some of that stuff and to see what are the outcomes of kids that get deselected at different stages. And I'm just working my way through that, but it's very, very interesting. And, I would have been involved with development squads and stuff before, and a lot of those would have had a lot of negative connotations and stuff. So to see somebody actually do a piece of academic research on the outcomes of different kids that actually get deselected from squads, I think is interesting. And that whole field, I think of academia can be dry and can be boring and stuff at times, but if you can make it kind of very context specific to your own situation or to some situation that actually matters to people, I think that's where that kind of stuff can come alive and can engage people. And she does a lot of really good stuff that's very interesting in that kind of field,
Absolutely. Just one last thing, Mike, I wanted to ask you about. Naturally, the conversation this week and the last couple of weeks has changed to what version the GA will take up after things get back to normal, and I put normal in inverted commas there for anybody who's listening. If it's a situation where we get back in June, July, August, September, nobody knows at this point, but it is a conversation that will need to be had eventually. Do you have a view on that, Mike? Is it a situation now where the Alliance Leagues will need to be scrapped, where a knockout championship only is the only thing that we could probably get done this year? And also, is this an opportunity for the club game to get put under more of a spotlight?
It is. Genuinely, I don't care what form comes, once we're back playing at some stage. I mean, we were loving the National League. We were just, taking such enjoyment out of it. And we won some and we lost some, but we had 2 games left that we felt were very winnable games that could have got us to 9 points and maybe into the conversation of getting promoted out of the division. And again, the group were very, very ambitious, and they were mad to try and get to that target and to see where it took us. And we were loving. I really do mean that the National League competition and I've always enjoyed the competition, and everybody has. But from being stuck in the middle of it all, the National League is an absolutely brilliant competition. And the only problem is, we had 2 games bumped because of storms and the bad weather, like everybody had. But I mean, that competition moves into the summertime when the weather is good and when fields are nice and the weather is beautiful. It would be just an amazing competition to have running over the course of the summer when teams are playing each other at an even level. It'd be just the best thing we could ever do. In terms of what we're going to get this championship season, honest to God, man, I just want to be playing and I want to be back involved in training and getting guys out in the field. So whether that's knockout, which everybody seems to think is the most likely conclusion, then great. Let's see what we can do about it. But the main thing is that everybody is safe, man, and we get back out in the field eventually, whenever that comes.
Yeah, it's not important in the grand scheme of things, but hopefully, fingers crossed, at some point this year, it will seem a little bit more important. These trivial things will seem as important as they seemed 12 months ago, and we can start actually properly conversing about these things. Listen, Mike, it's been great chatting to you. Take care, and we'll chat to you again soon.
Okay, mind yourself.
Leash manager Mike Quirke there on the line this morning. It is 8:43 on this Wednesday morning. Just a quick reminder that the OTB YouTube channel and all of our podcast streams on the OTB Podcast Network are completely free to subscribe to, and they're jam-packed with quality content on our YouTube channel and throughout our podcast streams. From the last few days alone, you will find the Hunt Brothers Reunited, that was on last night's football show, the Humphries Rivalry Reignited, World Cup 1998 Revisited, Paul Rouse, and his latest sports history lecture came as well on last night's show. Dear Meddling in conversation with Ger, a great chat for Monday's OTB AM, our Matt Holland feature interview, and then a couple of classic game clubs as well, the latest being Galway versus Kildare, the 1998 football final. All of that and much more. You can subscribe to the OTB AM podcast stream as well, wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll timestamp it for you every morning so you can scroll through whatever you want. Okay, so Leinster Rugby strength and conditioning coach Joe McGinley joins us next on OTB AM. But first, here is the Hunt brothers from last night's football show.
I remember half-time, coming in at half-time going, well done lads, we're doing well, but I think we were 1-0 down, or it was one, you know what, even my memory is still rubbish, but it was literally 1-0 down, and I didn't know, I thought it was 0-0 at the time, so
you got a bang in the head, did you?
I got a bang in the head from, I think it was Pirlo free kick after about 12 minutes, the ball hitting the back of my head, and literally just playing the game from there on in, just on the edge of obviously playing well, and not even knowing I was playing well, I did know. But I didn't know the score at half time.
Go away. So your best game for Ireland, you were running around concussed.
One of my best games, Joe. Yes.
One of your best games. One of your best games.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're on autopilot then. What does that tell you? That's the way to play the game.
Well, the way to play with no fear for sure, and play relaxed. And I remember taking on players and going past players. Listen, whenever it was against Italy, I always played well against Italy. So my level of intensity, so much to the fact that obviously Buffon in our last game asked me for his shirt, so I can't have done that bad against Italy if he's asking me for my shirt. So I remember him coming. I've said this before. Coming in Liège asking me for my shirt, and I thought Marco and Trapp were taking the mickey. So no, I said being serious, so we swapped shirts. Yeah, so anyway, going back to Barry, he was.
No, hang on a sec. Sorry, I thought you meant that Pirlo might have been just standing next to you, and we better swap shirts. He got word into the dressing room afterwards, was it?
Yeah, no, Buffon, not Pirlo. Buffon coming.
Yeah, Buffon, I know. Yeah,
and asked for my shirt. So the boys thought that he was taking the mickey, and so did I, to be honest with you. But no, so we ended up swapping shirts and going from there. And saying goodbye to each other at the airport as we jetted off in a private jet. So listen, it's a little story. He hasn't even made the Hall of Fame on my games room in Ireland, but it's good.
Jeez, you and Buffon. That's a nice one, isn't it?
Yeah, well, listen, it's one for sure that everybody will remember Buffon. Not too sure everybody will remember Stephen Hunt, but in terms of...
You in your house have the Buffon jersey up on the wall somewhere. Is the Hunt jersey up in Buffon's house?
I don't know. We'll have to ask him in Italian. But listen, it is the story. Whether he still has my jersey or not is another thing. But for sure, it was a nice memory to have.
Oh, yeah.
Great story there from Stephen Hunt on last night's Off the Ball, obviously speaking alongside his brother Noel. Great stuff in that about the disputed goal with Robbie Keane as well. You can check all that out on offtheball.com. Now, every day around about lunchtime, we've been releasing a new video on all of our social channels. It's called Off the Couch, where we've been getting people who know what they're talking about to try and help you feel a bit more active, to be a little bit less sedentary. And our next guest has done today's video for us. It's Joe McGinley, who works with the Leinster Rugby team and also St. Vincent's as a strength and conditioning coach. You're very welcome, Joe. Can you tell us a bit about your video first and what you think we should all be doing to try and just be a little bit less cabin fever and a little bit less trapped in our houses?
Good morning. How's it going? How are you? I'm all right. Good. I threw in a video, I suppose, from an athlete's perspective. Just one of the big concerns, I suppose, a lot of the athletes might have during this period, especially with the uncertainty of time, is just the loss of strength and speed, and maybe even lean mass or muscle mass, depending on what sport they're involved in. So I suppose I put a focus on that and threw a video together and just kind of reiterate the important factors of maintaining those attributes, which is sprinting for speed and power and strength, and plenty of work and keeping the muscle working with good quality time under tension and load from trying to preserve a lean mass. So that's the approach I took.
One of the things I've always found, which is really interesting, is how, as an industry, you guys all seem to share notes and talk to each other. Has that been noticeable? I know you're all supposed to be working for teams who are competitive in sports that are supposed to be battling for hearts and minds, but I've always been amazed at how well, as individuals, you work collectively as a sport or as different sports to try and teach each other things.
No, I think that's very true, and I think that's happening quite a bit lately. I think even within the RFU family itself, and within the provinces, and just across clubs and S&Cs in general, I think we're sharing a lot of information, and it's a great place to be. We're all fighting the same battle. It's a very uncertain period and a very worrying period for a lot of people. And I think if you can just add value and share your knowledge, and if you're in a position to do that in any shape or form, please do it. Because I suppose other people have more challenging jobs in this period, the people that are on the front line. And I suppose it'll just give you some focus to, if you can share information or chat to a young coach and help him out, or even chat to an older coach and help yourself out. I think it gives you something to do and something to focus on yourself during this period.
And so are you noticing fairly similar issues cropping up from different sports, kind of irrespective of whether or not it's the guys that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis? But like, would inter-county squads be having the same issues that you guys are having with the international football team, and Premier League teams all be having exactly the same issues for their athletes?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. And it's very hard. Like most coaches would plan from a kind of a work back model, where they take a starting date or a first game and work back from that. And I know that's very difficult because we don't know the timeline, and that definitely is a challenge. It must be a challenge for everyone. It's a challenge for me. So I'm just thinking it must be a struggle, and it's just hard to know what to do or how to advise the players, during that period. And I think it's, as long as we take a common sense approach and kind of put the family and put the community first, focus on that. And then I think at this stage, in my opinion anyway, it's probably just from a mental health well-being that players should exercise if they're in a position to exercise, or if they're in a position to go for a run or do a circuit outside, But those with families and those with kids, or those maybe trying to help manage somebody or cocoon a vulnerable person, it's going to be difficult for them to do that, So I wouldn't stress it either. I think, we're potentially looking down the barrel of a couple of weeks or maybe even more off. So it's not something I would fret too much, So if anyone is in that position, I wouldn't worry too much. I think, stick to your normal routine of what you're doing. Exercise, 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day if you can, if you have time, but it's minimal dose that you're going to be looking for during this period. And don't sweat the small stuff. And I suppose in this current situation, the exercise and sport probably is a small thing at the moment,
Yeah, it does seem to be important for people's mental health. And I think that applies across the general populace as well. If you can get out for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour walk every day, I think certainly, we had Andy Dunn on last week, and he was talking about the physiological impact that exercise has on you, the hormones that it releases. It just actually makes you feel good. It's not psychosomatic. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's certainly something that everybody can learn.
Yeah, and I was even just chatting to a few colleagues yesterday, and we were just saying that, like, one of my own tips was just try and get up and go for a quick walk or quick exercise during your normal commuting time. So if you were used to walking out the front door and jumping in a car or jumping on the Dart or whatever it was, or a bus, like, use that as your window of just getting fresh air and physically getting out of the house. And that it's just a good physical kind of mental tick to start your day, because that was your normal routine anyway. And it'll try and keep things in cycle for you. Go for a quick walk again when you would generally be commuting home. At least that way your body clock is probably the same as it was previous, and it'll be easy to adapt into a good quality sleep cycle then again, and a good quality cycle of going back to work when hopefully we can go back to work soon enough for you.
Yeah, for sure. Joe, you were using paint tins in one of the bits of the video that we showed there. So be creative is the other piece of advice, I suspect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's time to go a bit rogue. I don't have any personal gym equipment at home, funny enough. So I was just using various things like that. So I think a lot of people have done that. I've spoke to a few players now that have started making their own weights and stuff just at home, stacking them up on pallets on the farms and things like that, which is great. And again, that's just an activity and a distraction in itself to be able to, pick up a few tools and give something like that a go, So it was nice to hear stories like that.
Your video focuses on eccentric training. How does that work, and why is it so effective at this point, do you think?
Yeah, it's just difficult. Obviously, we don't want to put anybody in a position where they're trying to buy weights or trying to move large amount of weights around the house. And I suppose rugby players by nature are generally used to handling big loads or big force. So like if a guy is generally coming from squatting maybe 150 kilos, like we can't expect him, if he's living in an apartment or living in a small house in town, to have that amount of weight around. So we're just looking at ways to keep the muscle stressed for as long as possible. I just focused in on that one aspect, which is the tempo of the movement. So there's a when you're lifting a weight, you shorten the muscle and you lengthen the muscle. So during that lengthening period of weightlifting, we know that the muscle is getting long. It is getting stretched and it's getting slightly torn during that period. So if we can extenuate that stress, generally speaking, it'll go a long way to maintain the strength quality of that muscle and also the size of that muscle. And then it can be done with a slightly lighter weight. The eccentric part of your muscle movement is generally a lot stronger than the rest of the other movements. So that's the one you want to chase for the benefits. So yeah, that's the approach I took. I just thought it was the one easy way around it,
Joe, a question for you. When you're looking at the videos that people are putting out, are there common mistakes that people are making when they might have been not used to doing exercise every day? Like, are there mistakes that those of us who are amateurs, who are trying not to be sedentary, are prone to make? Too much stresses? Did I see too many burpee jumps? Was something that somebody was talking about?
Yeah. I think a lot of people, look at exercise as just trying to be sore, as in if it was hard, it was good, but I think any fool can make a fool sore at the end of the day. And I think an exercise, from my perspective, is all about adding value to you as a person and to your sport, So I'm always of the opinion with those type of things, less is more, and quality over quantity, So I would do an exercise as you should feel good walking away from it. You shouldn't be crippled the next day, So I think use that as a litmus test. If you get up the next morning and you're pretty sore, can't tie your shoelaces, I think you might have overdone the burpees or stuff yesterday. That would be my general approach to it anyway.
Okay, fair enough. And one last question for you: differences between GAA and rugby, is everybody kind of in the same boat at this point, given that, most people?
I think so. Everyone, is in the same boat. I suppose for like my role in Leinster is head of fitness for the academy. So I suppose it's slightly different concern or slightly different training stimulus compared to maybe an intercounty footballer or hurler or even a senior rugby player, where their focus is on development and maybe getting a little bit bigger and globally stronger. And I suppose their priority now is try and hold on to that. Your general footballer might want to maintain his running volume, because we're obviously, football might be coming back with a bang. When it does come back, I think we could be getting like a 2-week notice or whatever before a game. So it'd be important for the footballers, I think, to maintain the quality of their on-feet work, like their running and their sprinting. So that's not a big shock to the hamstrings or calves when we have to go back training, and then mixing in, obviously trying to going back to work during that period as well, where you could be on feet at work suddenly and then on feet trying to train on a football field suddenly. And when that all comes together, I suppose you want to have a little bit of mileage in the legs during that period. So I like to train in absolutes, and what I mean by that is a good quality speed session to maintain the speed and a good quality aerobic session to maintain the on feet. Maintain your on-feet loads. So I would be thinking, doing sprints of like 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters on one day, and that session lasting half an hour, and then a steady run on another day, which is lasting about 5 kilometers, 3 to 5 kilometers, whatever your normal running range is, and then a good quality strength session in the middle of it. I don't think at this stage footballers should be out, or any sport person should be out hammering themselves. You know what I mean? Just keep all the qualities ticking over. Would be my opinion.
All right, that's very simple to understand advice, and it seems like very good advice as well. Joe, you've been great with your time. Thanks a million, and best of luck with putting this time in. On a personal level, is this a good opportunity to kind of, we had Michael Quirke earlier on talking about using this to brush up on his academic stuff and kind of just see what else is out there in the world. Is that what you're doing too?
Yeah, pretty much now. We have a baby on the way, so a lot of home decorating going on at the minute. So that's keeping me ticked over. But yeah, like I think we're very lucky. We have a very good team in Leinster and even team in Vincent and within the RFU. And there's still a lot of communication going on, which is great. And most of it's just about personal development and professional development. And we're having good conversations with other S&Cs around the world. And personally myself, having a good number of conversations with S&Cs that I would have worked with in the past, and seeing how they're getting on with their career and what challenges they have. And I was chatting to a former colleague that's working in Japan. I was chatting to colleagues that are working in the other provinces, and it's just great to see how other people are getting on. And again, it's a global crisis, so I suppose everybody's in the same boat, and it's a tough time for everyone. 100%. I think just the quality of conversation is just a great thing to be able to do. It doesn't have to be work related, but I know everybody's saying it. The Zoom has been fantastic. The house party app has been fantastic, and I think it's a good opportunity to reach out to people. And it just reiterates the value of conversation and staying connected during these times.
100%. Joe, you've been great with your time. Thanks a million. Best of luck with everything.
Not at all. Take care, lads, and mind yourselves.
You too. That's Joe McGinley there, who's a strength and conditioning coach with the Leinster Academy, who's done our Off the Couch video today, which will go live around about lunchtime. Now, it's just coming up to 9 o'clock this morning. It's Wednesday, the 1st of April. Thanks very much for joining us throughout the morning here on OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. We're not done yet. Andy Lee is launching the OTB Culture Club after the ads. A reminder before you go to go and subscribe to the OTB AM podcast, where you'll find every episode fully timestamped so you can scroll through and just hit the bits that you want. First, though, we're going to play you this. 16 of Ireland's most iconic sports stars have joined forces to send a video message to the nation to unite by staying apart as our country continues to tackle the COVID-19 challenge. Have a look.
Everyone knows that the Irish are the best farms in the world.
We travel the world supporting this great little country.
With our flags, green jerseys and banners.
We do our country proud wherever we go.
Now it's time for us all to unite.
And rise to the occasion.
By keeping our distance.
And by staying at home.
We are facing into one of the biggest fights
in our country's history.
The future of our nation and our people is in our hands.
This situation isn't easy for any of us.
We're all in the same boat.
We're all in this together.
We're all in isolation.
We're all missing friends, families and loved ones.
We are all experiencing
the same fears and emotions.
But this is what we have to do to keep our country and our people safe.
Our heroes are now our healthcare workers.
The nurses and doctors working on the front line.
Putting themselves at risk.
To protect you, me,
and our friends and families.
Protect yourselves
and protect your loved ones.
Unite.
By staying apart.
Unite.
By staying apart. Please, stay at home, everyone.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
They spoke about your arm not being down beside your side. I mean, this is not Irish dancing.
OTB Sports Radio.
Basketball would have been my main game.
The brand new sports radio station from Off the Ball.
That's my point. Don't play for us if you're a proud Englishman.
Now broadcasting 24 hours a day. Live on the Go Loud app, Alexa.
You have a whole new world of possibilities.
Google Home, tune in, and offtheball.com/radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
The OTB Culture Club, brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
Right, you're very welcome along to episode 1 of the OTB Culture Club. We're here with thanks to Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for on Now TV. And you, as you can see, Andy Lee has joined us. Andy, first off, how are you? How's it going?
As well as can be hoped. Following the rules, staying indoors, the odd run here, there, a bit of weights in the garden, and entertaining 2.5-year-old daughter. That's pretty much my day to day now. Keeping them busy.
I did hear somebody say that the kids are actually at that age, they're loving this. They're like, hang on a second, I've got everybody around all the time. What's going on? It's like being on holidays for them.
A little bit, but she does miss her crash. You know, she keeps asking to go to school. Now school is closed. Just told everyone has a cold, so I have to stay in, and that's the party line.
I mean,
but yeah. Other than that, she's delighted. She's watching more cartoons than she ever watched in her life combined, I'd say.
Well, look, the point of the Culture Club is we ask somebody who we trust and who we believe in to bring us a piece of important culture. In this case,
Yeah.
What has Andy Lee brought us?
Well, this is not a really cultural choice. We could have, myself and Owen, we interviewed Paddy Considine with Journeyman, much more cultural than this. And we also had the Game of Thrones. I spoke to Sue Murphy about probably my favourite film, or whenever it was, Old Boy, the Korean movie.
Oh, yeah.
But for, the very cultured audience that is Off the Ball listeners and viewers, we're going Rocky Free.
Now, when we fought, you had that eye of the tiger, man, the edge. And now you got to get it back. And the way to get it back is to go back to the beginning. You know what I mean?
United Artists and Chartoff Winkler proudly present.
What is it about Rocky 3 that you think is deserving of a place in the OTB Culture Club, in the Andy Lee Hall of Fame? What is it?
No, the remit was from Tommy Rooney. Something that you watched that, meant something to you. And listen, I haven't watched this film in years. I probably wouldn't watch it now if it was on TV. But growing up as a young aspiring boxer, I'm not sure what came first, Rocky or the boxing, Rocky was certainly around growing up. But it was just like, I lived it every day, And Rocky 3 was I watched them all, but Rocky 3 was certainly my favorite. Why? Because it's got everything. It's got, he was a champ. The start of it is the end of Rocky 2, where he wins the title. And you have that great music playing, and it's, you're getting chills and tingles, and you're real pumped. And then you see him going into a champ. It's got wrestling. It's got Hulk Hogan, which I was a big wrestling fan as a kid.
Thunderlips.
It's got Mr. T, Mr. T from the A-Team in it. And it's got Apollo Creed, and it's got some great montages, and at the end he wins. So it's great. There was plenty of characters in there who we used to pretend to be as kids. We'd take turns being Rocky, take turns being Apollo, take turns being, if it was wrestling, would be Thunderlips. So it was great.
Thunderlips was the man. It's almost as if there's like a template that each Rocky film follows. It's like opening montage, bit of dialogue, middle montage, bit more dialogue, fight, montage, another fight, ends. That's almost the entire concept for Rocky, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks like he's not going to do it, and then right at the end, he kind of something clicks, and he comes back to win the fight. Like he, in this one, he obviously loses Mickey. Mickey dies before or during the first fight. His longtime coach and mentor. And there was some conflict between them because he realizes that Mickey had been handpicking his opponents. That he wasn't a real champ, that he wasn't fighting the best contenders, that they kind of managed his career, which a lot of champions do, and which was quite, realistic, that a lot of fighters cherry pick and cruise. And then he realizes, no, he's got to fight this guy, Clubber Lang, who confronts him at the unveiling of the Rocky statue in Philadelphia.
You've got a big mouth.
Why don't you come out and close your mouth, boy? Come on.
I want to fight this guy.
You're fighting without me.
And then he has to face a real opponent, and he gets beat because he faced soft opposition, and then he has to do some soul searching, and he meets up with Apollo Creed, his former foe, and he learns some finesse. He learns how to box, eventually learns how to really box.
He learned how to box in a pretty short space of time. It turns out it's pretty easy.
We don't know how long those montages are, though. I don't think that could have been a year and a half condensed.
I want to say, I'm sorry, Owen is a little bit skeptical about this whole thing. I actually think that there's no reason to be skeptical about this. And I can't believe you're saying if it was on TV now, you wouldn't watch it. I sat down last night with fairly low expectations, but I absolutely loved it. I would wholeheartedly recommend that people stop what they're doing, and if they haven't seen this recently, this is definitely, it's so cheesy.
I'll bust you out. Go for it.
It's like one of the schmaltziest things you're ever going to see, and it's so utterly predictable. But there are bits of this that are actually genuinely laugh out loud, and not always intentionally. Like the final scene is absolutely hilarious. But I think as a cultural artifact of where America was in the 1980s, the early 1980s, it's pretty amazing. And when you think Sylvester Stallone invented the whole Rocky franchise, like he wrote and acted in the first one at a time when he was absolutely nobody, and here we are. What is it? 50 years later, where they're still making Creed movies, and actually those Creed movies have a credibility that I'm not sure if this, I don't know if these movies were credible per se when they come out, but Rocky won an Oscar as far as I know. So,
yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
Just to go into the Oscar win, just to put it into context, what that Oscar win was for Rocky, the 49th Academy Awards for Best Picture, it beat All the President's Men, Network, and Taxi Driver. But this is the first Rocky. I think that's an unbelievable achievement, let's put it that way, that Rocky managed to hold off Taxi Driver to win the Best Picture award.
Yeah, probably would be looked back at one of those great travesties like Shawshank not winning, But it was such a big cultural thing. And like you say, Ger, that was when it was great to be American, where kids growing up, you wanted to be American, you wanted to go to America. It was like, had all other such films like, The Best of the Best, or those Van Damme films, where they were like, America was the place to be, and, no retreat, no surrender. And it was cool to be American back then. It was just, it was definitely of its time. There's also a heavy bit of homoeroticism in there with the two lads on the beach hugging it out and running, which is also cool. Those short shorts. I don't know if you get away with them today.
Ding ding at the end. Oh my God, myself and my wife were shitting ourselves on the couch laughing at this. It was literally the most homoerotic film I've ever seen. Like, there is no two ways of looking at this other than it's a love story between Apollo Creed and Sylvester Stallone. You cannot, or Rocky Balboa, I should say. I don't know what the two lads' relationship was like in real life. And fair play to them, but it was like from the get-go, there was just this kind of brooding chemistry between them, and I thought that was like one of the best and most interesting and funniest subplots that you're ever going to see. Can I ask you about the boxing specifically, though, because it struck me afterwards that the plot of the second fight is very Rumble in the Jungle. The tactics that that Rocky Balboa uses seem to be very similar to what Ali did in the Rumble in the Jungle, and also that first round of Clubber Lang versus Rocky Balboa was one of the all-time great rounds of heavyweight boxing that you're ever going to see. It was sensational.
Heavyweights, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what height Sylvester is. I think he's about 5'8", so I'm not sure. But yeah, in terms of the technique, it's not great. I don't think they'd hold up. I was actually watching it again, with fresh eyes a bit last night, and I watched the last fight, and they must have. I can't remember. Like, I'd love for someone to sit down and actually do the compute stats of what the actual punches thrown and landed were, because they weren't missing with anything, and the jabs, it was sensational around. But the referee, like, he'd be stricken off straight away. Like, his performance was brutal. Those guys could have got stopped 3 or 4 times before they eventually stopped the fight. But yeah, he one thing I did like about him, so it's one thing I've recognized, is that Rocky kind of broke Clubber Lang's heart a little bit, in that he took his best, obviously, lost the first fight, and then he realized that this guy is a bully and he has to intimidate you. And then once Rocky wasn't intimidated, it started to creep a little bit of doubt into Clubber's mind, and eventually, he got the better of him, and he started to feel sorry for himself then, Clubber Lang. And that was it then. And what the difference was, what the improvements from Rocky 3 in terms of Rocky's technique. When he knocked out Apollo in Rocky 2 at the end, both of them fell. So his balance wasn't good, but his balance improved, and he didn't fall. He just kind of leant off and kind of regained his footing.
There's something about almost a caricature about Clubber Lang, isn't there, in Rocky 3, that it's just so ridiculous, all the lines that he utters, all the things that he does. It is just painting a villainous picture of him. There's no redeeming quality whatsoever. There's no sort of 3D Clubber Lang picture that I certainly get from it. It's just, here is the bad guy, and everything he's going to say is something that a bad guy should say.
I wonder how much influence his persona had on Mike Tyson, who would later, who probably grew up as well watching Clubber Lang. And I think his backstory is that he grew up in an orphanage and had to fight for everything, and something similar to what Mike Tyson had, you know, in real life.
I think that it was remarkable how this guy exists in pop culture before Mike Tyson is a fighter, who is a fighter growing up around the same time watching that. I thought it was like, even kind of, you know, so I didn't realize that was the introduction of Mr. T to pop culture. I kind of hadn't put that all together, and I didn't realize that the A-Team comes so soon afterwards, and I pity the fool. He issued the immortal line. It's like, yeah, this is great. That was like, that was a cheer out loud moment for me. But it is exactly the persona that Mike Tyson takes on. But in the ring, when you're talking about Balboa breaking Clubber Lang's heart, that all you got, sucker. That's what Ali, when George Foreman is beating the head off Ali in the first 2 or 3 rounds, that's what Ali is saying to George Foreman. Oh, you got sucker.
You ain't so bad. Like, you ain't so bad. I think it was what Rocky was saying. You know. Yeah.
Like they didn't just decide
he's
that
from that. Sylvester Stallone is quite clever in that sense. But I'm not sure if you saw a tweet I said out the other day. One of the bugbears is like, Sylvester Stallone's in the Hall of Fame, the Boxing Hall of Fame, the actual boxing. Where's Carl Weathers? Where's Apollo Creed? Surely he belongs in the Hall of Fame. If not as a fighter, but also as a coach now.
As a trainer, yeah. I did want to ask you, actually, Andy. I thought, you know, in retrospect, his performance in the corner between rounds in particular was pretty shitty. It was like, go out there and kill him. I'm like, that's not the advice, you know? There's a great scene where they're 2 calm men, you know, fighter and coach. And this is how I would picture, you know, you and any of your charges, like very calmly, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to do it. And your fighter's like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then all of a sudden he's just like, ah, and fighting in the ring beforehand, like completely losing his temper.
And he says, I thought he said, stay cool. That was cool. Apollo replies.
Andy, whenever you were
talking, out there, kill him, be a man.
Whenever you're talking about the Kronk gym, I have a sort of vision in my head of what it is. The gym they go to in Los Angeles in Rocky 3 is that exact thing. So I'm not sure had I seen Rocky 3 years ago, and that's automatically the superimposed image I have of the Kronk gym when you talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm sure in America at that time there were a lot of gyms like that. You know. Maybe Joe Frazier's gym in Philadelphia, they got the inspiration from. But that was certainly the Kronk gym. You know, there was no fancy equipment. There was rundown and there was a sweat box, and you had to fight, you know, to get out of there. And like a lot of former world champions would come to the gym, and they'd be getting beaten up by the kids in there. You know, so they had to learn and it was like I think obviously Sylvester Stallone when he was writing the film, he drew from all those things that were real, you know, that were realistic.
I actually really liked that narrative where he had become lazy as the world champion, because it happens in so many sports where a fighter or a footballer or whoever gets rich and they get soft. And like the scenes where he's training for the first fights, where there's like a band playing and he's, you know, random girls are giving him kisses, getting his photograph taken. That was all brilliant, shticky, but like layering it on with a trowel for anybody who was unaware of exactly what was happening. But I thought like it probably mirrors Stallone's life himself. I don't remember anything about Rocky 2. I'm going to have to go back and look at it. Obviously, Rocky wins an Oscar, he gets rich. But Rocky 3 seems to me like a bit of a comeback as a filmmaker, where he can stand over this as a piece of work that's going to be quite funny and enduring, and has some iconic scenes. Introduces the statue to the city of Philadelphia. Now, there's been a nice little subplot over the years where the city of Philadelphia were like, oh, shut up. Look at this crappy statue that your man's given us. What are we going to do with this? And they wanted to take it away. But eventually, the weight of tourism and everybody who wanted to see it, it's like back in a very prominent place in Philadelphia now. So this movie has a lot to recommend it, I think, after all these years.
Which is a better statue, that statue or Niall Quinn's Ronaldo statue in Portugal?
There's some dodgy statues. They're obviously, you know, Philadelphia was the home of Joe Frazier, Smoke Joe Frazier, and there's always been a big, you know, campaign to remove Rocky from the steps and replace it with Joe, which I don't even think Sylvester Stallone would argue that he deserves a statue probably alongside him, or if not replacing him. But it's a cultural this film, like, it's the first film that Sylvester Stallone directed, first of the Rocky films that he directed. So it also has that. So yeah, I think it's an achievement. Look, as a kid, it was my favorite Rocky film. He trained with, and he learned how to fight. All those moves we were trying to replicate and imitate in the living room and out on the yard. And so for that reason, Rocky 3 is going to pick.
A reminder here that this is the OTB Culture Club. Andy Lee is our guest this week. He's putting Rocky 3 in the OTB Culture Club. It's sponsored by Now TV. Stream award-winning dramas such as Game of Thrones and Parks and Recreation on Now TV right now. Andy, in terms of like what you think makes the movie so good, what is the secret of this movie? If you were trying to explain to somebody, you know, and you did a 30-second elevator pitch about why they should sit down and watch this, what would you say to them?
Well, I think it's, Owen touched on it. It's you know, it's overcoming fear. There's a lot of themes in it, isn't he? It's like, you know, this one is slightly different because he was already the champ. He didn't come from nothing, but he had to rebuild himself from a humiliating defeat, losing his coach, realizing that he's not actually a bona fide champ, that his opponents were cherry picked, and he's lost his hunger and has to go find himself again. And he rediscovers that with Apollo, his former opponent. And then he goes and beats the guy who beat him. And the soundtrack alone, no, that deserves an Oscar. Never mind the film. The soundtrack alone could be part of the Culture Club because that's where Die the Tiger first appeared. And yeah, I think if you need any type of more, like if you watch that before you go for a run or before you do the gym session, you'll be well motivated.
Yeah, and I think as well that the overall score by Bill Conti as well is fantastic. Like I kind of wanted to hate this. I'm not going to lie, Andy. Like I've always had a very skeptical eye over Rocky, but Rocky 3 does bring you in for the rematch of Clubber Lang and for that final fight between Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa, and fight obviously in inverted commas. And I think I think Apollo turns to Rocky at the end and he says, "It's too bad, we got to get old." There's almost a tear coming from my eye at that point. I think that final 25 minutes is actually pretty good, and I think the soundtrack, I think Conti's soundtrack for the rematch is actually phenomenal. I think that's the one part of the film where you're like, that's actually phenomenal. That's really, really good.
Listen, we could have sat here and talked about like obscure foreign film or, you know, whatever it might be. But we're here talking about Rocky 3, and I think it deserves to be the first film in the Off the Ball Culture Club.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you for actually inducting it, Andy. I'm not going to actually tell you that it's the wrong thing to actually.
You get like a revolving table. Like after once you fill up with other guests, Rocky will be tossed.
It's like, okay, so
I just want to out you here. Hang on a second before you, because you before we were coming on here, you were like, Stallone is rubbish. He's not a good actor. This is terrible. That's actually what you were saying this time yesterday. So I don't know if something's changed now that Andy's here, you know, a former champion of the world.
Stand over your conviction.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, you need to channel your inner Sylvester Stallone, Rocky Balboa here and stand up to him.
Like, I mean, I will say that your cough gets softened a little bit when you are listening to Andy talk about culture. But here's my take. I actually think Sylvester Stallone is not a good actor. I think that there's an unbelievable level of cheese that goes with every single thing he says as Rocky Balboa. Some people may say that there's almost a charm to that. I mean, maybe not all athletes should be the most charismatic people ever. Maybe he's got that nailed. I disagree with that personally. I think we've already used the term unintentionally funny in this. Like, The Room is unintentionally funny. That's why it is famous. There is no unintentionally funny film that can be good because it is unintentionally funny. It is the crappiness of it that makes it unintentionally funny. Like Thunder Lips and what is it? What's the line that I've got written down here? The ultimate male versus the ultimate meatball is one of Thunder Lips' lines. Like picking Rocky up, throwing him out of the ring.
That's intentionally funny.
Is it? I don't know.
I've had situations
they
like
that
that
to be
like,
funny.
I know. I tell you what's one of the worst feelings in the world, where you turn up for something that you're not prepared for. You think it's like, think for charity or it's something like, you know, good, you're doing that out of goodwill, and whoever you're against better be like, A road race I done one time. I turned up, like, I did a road race one time. I thought it was just like a charity run. And these people were actually like ready to blaze to like, they took off like as soon as they said go. Like, there's nothing worse. Like, I'm often, like, the other day I did a charity thing in the stadium where I boxed how many rounds, 1 minute rounds, whoever paid 20 quid a box a round to raise money for charity. And the guys were like, I hadn't been in the ring since I retired. These guys turned up ready to kill me. And I had to pull myself together. Rocky did. That's what happened with Rocky and Thunderlips. It was so like, Owen, don't let you be in the situation.
Okay,
Your man was nearly 400 pounds. He was twice his weight.
Yeah, like he was, and I mean, he still manages to pick him up and throw him out of the ring. It's remarkable. Like there's also like a little bit of inconsistency with Mickey throughout this.
How many great champions now are going into wrestling? Tyson Fury recently did it. Mayweather did it. Muhammad Ali did it.
Ahead of his time.
I can't really disagree with you there, Andy. You certainly kind of that flies right in the face of my argument. But like just on Mickey, there's like a severe lack of faith in Rocky throughout this. Like you say at the start here that Rocky kind of comes to this realization that actually he's been fighting tomato cans all this time, and actually. Has he really, or has the coach actually just been like a bit of a dick to him, really, by saying that to him? Does he actually have full faith in him, and then to allow him to go through a camp? Now, granted, this is all going to be down to Balboa, but to allow him to go through a ridiculous camp before coming out in front of the camera before the fight and says, "My fighter's never been in better shape. He is the best." And he's going to win. I think that's a bit of a conflict. I think Mickey comes across really badly in Rocky 3. Also, why did nobody get him to the hospital before he died? He's just lying there in the dressing room while the fight is happening. Nobody gets him to the hospital. So there's a lot of things wrong with this. But then they just drive back in with the twee final scenes and you're almost crying. You're like, okay, this is a 6.5.
Yeah, I think. Listen, I forget. I was trying to think what I was going to say during your argument there. But a lot of coaches do that. A lot of coaches know their fighter. That's a part of a coach's job, to know your fighter, who he can be, who he can't be, and to protect him. The fighter's got to think he's invincible, but the coach needs to know that he's not. And so he had to pick him. And then eventually he comes to realize that he tells him straight. Look, we had to take it easy. You're not fighting this club of lamb. We had to protect you and look after you. I think Mickey really cared for Rocky. He didn't want to see him getting another beating like he took against Apollo. And he knew there's a short career. Let's make money. Mickey's been waiting all his life to get a heavyweight champ. He's not going to serve him up to some club of lang coming from nowhere. Why should he? Protect the asset. Keep him safe.
I think there's a bit of a conflict.
It was simple, good management, Owen. That was it. Two last points, Andy. Let's rank Apollo as a boxer, right? So you were asking earlier on why he's in the Hall of Fame. I forgot as well, of course, that like he's the father of Creed, who, you know, that's like another layer that should have got him into the Hall of Fame. Was Carl Weathers, did he move like, I don't actually know anything about his backstory. Did he move like a proper fighter in the scenes where he's training Rocky?
I think his footwork and his balance, and I think so. And apparently I read somewhere that he only started training like for 6 or 7 months before the first Rocky film, and he really got it, like, came together. But you can see he was inspired by Muhammad Ali. I think Muhammad Ali got the story of Rocky, about the inspiration from a guy called George Travallo, who was a heavyweight contender who would never knock down, never stop, but wasn't really a great fighter. And he just wanted to go the distance with Ali, and he did. And that's where Sylvester Stallone got the inspiration from. And he can see that he was totally modeled on Ali. And in that shape, he did actually move and like, he really did glide around the ring. Now, whether he could do it for 12 rounds in a real fight, who knows? But for coordinated kind of choreographed sequences, he looked good.
His ability to run slowly to allow Sylvester Stallone to beat him in that race on the beach and still look like he was going hard was like a thing of beauty.
When they're on the beach, Rocky used to run like with his fist closed, and then Apollo used to run with his hands open. And so as a kid, I would always run with my hands open because I thought it made you faster.
I mean, it's science. I think it does. And then, so where would these fighters rate in real life? You know, so we have.
In real life, who knows?
So Rocky Balboa is a 2-time champion at this stage. who had 10 successful defenses, who beat the Mike Tyson guy in his rematch. Like, that's an all-time great heavyweight career, right?
Goes on to beat the Russian. Does he lose to Tommy Morrison, Tommy Gunn? I think he might in the street fight as he trains Tommy Gunn in Rocky 5. They have a street fight and he beats him in the street fight. Well, it's pretty much Hall of Fame career, I guess. But Apollo does deserve to be there too, in my eyes.
Right. That's fair enough, even though he...
Where do they rate in the fictional boxers?
Yeah. Ooh.
It's hard to know, isn't it?
Like,
well,
yeah.
Like,
most of the fictional boxers are based on real people.
Yeah, I know, yeah. But I would say it's just that, like Owen was saying, it's just, the comeback. It's like the hero's journey in the sense that you come from nothing, you go on, you overcome adversity, and you succeed.
Yeah, then that's exactly what the city of Philadelphia is about. You mentioned a genuine artistic boxing movie at the get-go here, and it is something that we've spoken about on the show before. But just to remind everybody, if everybody was too excited earlier on, what film are you talking about?
Oh, if I was to recommend a boxing film now, it would be Journeyman by Paddy Considine. He wrote, directed, and acted in it, and it's a real cultural film. And but we covered it already, me and Owen, so we're not gonna I'm not gonna pick. I have to show there's more to me. I have to be three-dimensional as well. No, it's really, really it's not really. You got so many of the small details, right? We talked about the details Sylvester Stallone had, but in terms of the small details, it's as close as I've seen, and it's actually quite a tragic film. And it's a guy who ends up getting a brain injury in a fight and has to deal with the fallout from that.
Yeah, it's pretty grim, isn't it? But you tell the story about actually watching it on a flight one time, and at the end of the flight, you made a fairly significant career decision.
That was another guy. I ended up watching it right as I retired. The film was coming out, and once I was in tears watching this film. I watched it in the Lighthouse in Stoneybatter, and I was in tears. And I remember thinking, like, I'm glad I'm retired. I really just nailed it and nailed it home for me. The film nailed it, and it just really drove it home for me that I'm out of this game, and I'm glad I am.
Andy, this is the OTB Culture Club. Do you have a piece of music at the moment that you're listening to, that you're turning to in times of crisis, or an album?
I listened to a bit of John Prine since I heard he was ill with COVID-19. He's got a great song called Christmas in Prison, and this is kind of what we're doing here every day, locked up in the house. That's what I face. But if I was to suggest an album, it would be Ignore the Ignorant by the Cribs.
Great shout.
Yeah, that's one I want to listen to all the time.
I think we had this conversation before. You've met them before, or at least?
I met them. Yeah, and when they played in Dublin, they played Whelan's a good few years ago now. I actually trained one of the lads, Gary. He's a big boxing fan. That's how we got in touch. And he lives in Portland, Oregon. He came to the Tyson Fury camp while we were there and got to watch his training and stuff. So we're good buddies now, which is still a bit surreal for me to think I can talk to these guys after following them for years and listening to them for years.
I'd say they're thinking exactly the same thing about you, though, Andy. That's how that works. That's the enduring power of the fight game is the thing that I'm taking away from Rocky. Like, you think about this boxing movie that beat all those other amazing films in the Oscars, and it's still going as a franchise now, and people are still happy to talk about it, and I think to sit on their couch. But there is an amazing enduring power for good cinema and bad cinema, wherever you think this falls on that scale for boxing. And I think the enduring power of boxing is something to do with that whole fact that they tend to be underdog stories and they have great characters. I don't know if you have any sense of why we're still watching boxing movies 100 years after they started being made, Andy.
Yeah, it's hard to see where they can go if there are any more stories left to be told in the boxing genre. But certainly the Paddy Considine film was a new type of boxing film in terms of the trauma and the recovery from that, the fallout and the recovery. But in terms of the Rocky films, they're easy to get behind, they're easy to root behind. And I think that's why we still watch boxing and watch boxing movies, because every kind of aspect of life is there, that you're facing your fears, you're overcoming them, and if you're lucky enough to win, it makes for a great film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's just on a final point, Ger, for me, sorry. It's so true. No matter what you're talking about, no matter what piece of culture you're talking about, whether it's an autobiography or a classic match or a classic sporting event or a film, it tends to be that boxing is the sport that is conducive to the highest quality product in the end. I think it's for the reason that you just outlined there, Andy.
And you have to, yeah, I think so. Whether it be books now, my own book, which is not too bad, or films, which is in the works. No.
I have it on that bookshelf there. Pretty good. Might pick it out again this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at your bookshelf, Jay. I don't see the fight around there.
I left my copy in work.
Yeah, that's grand. I'll send you one.
do. Right. That's the first episode of the OTB Culture Club. Andy, 100. I don't think that we should be ranking these. I will be giving it 10 out of 10.
I'm gonna hang up this call though. In a day or two, I'll be thinking, why didn't I suggest this film? Why didn't I suggest that film? But Tommy put me on the spot, and I just said, let's do this.
You did good. You did good for the very first episode of the OTB.
I did good, Mickey. I did good.
As my audience arrives, there you go.
Hey.
The OTB Culture Club is open for business, sponsored by Now TV. You can stream hilarious comedies from Curb Your Enthusiasm to Parks and Recreation, and some that's actually suitable for all the family. So there you go. You can stream unmissable shows such as Rocket Man and Lion King. Thanks, folks. We'll take a quick break.
Lads.
We're back after these. Good luck.
The OTB Culture Club, brought to you by Now TV. Watch whatever you're in the mood for.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.